Every day in back of my mind, I thought I was going to die on that yard, or I was going to kill somebody on that yard. My name is Drenk. I was born in Corona, California. I grew up as a child of a product of child molestation. My childhood was not good. I was a gang member by 12 years old. I was in 25 foster homes, over 30 group homes. Eventually landed me in California Youth Authority because I was deemed a program failure, and nobody in the United States would take me into their home. I grew up with a very physical, I was physically beat, and I was fighting grown men at 12 years old. So my life hasn't been all that great. I have three siblings. I have a younger stepsister. I have an older stepsister, and I have a stepbrother. And my brother and I both went to foster homes. He went at 8. I went at 9. So I forget the ages, but yeah, we both went. So, and then we got split up. He was adopted. I went to the group homes, and that was the beginning of the very horrible path. I had a many warped beliefs, and my coping mechanisms at the time were self-gratifying. They weren't, I didn't let people in. I couldn't express myself. I was very ashamed about my upbringing, my home life. Everything about me was a secret to everybody. And in fact, I lied about it. So nobody knew what was going on at home, that I was being molested by my mother, by my uncle, by my stepdad. I did everything I could to hide it. And, growing up, violence was my way of expressing myself, of taking some type of control. And if it was a means to an end. And, the system gave up on me, and they kept calling me a monster.
Virtually everyone who has studied or worked in California's youth prisons will tell you that the system was broken and it needed fixing. Kids who were prisoners were being beaten and abused. The courts have told the state prison officials to clean up their act and their prisons.
And a manipulator and everything else. So I decided, they gave me a title. I ended up living up to that title. I fed that monster as best I could. And ultimately, I couldn't see consequences at that time. I couldn't see that what I was going to pay for later. It was in that moment. I couldn't see past 18 years old. And then when I got 18 years old, I couldn't see past 25. And then when I got 25, I couldn't see past 30. And then when I got to 30, now I'm seeing like, okay, I'm probably going to live for a while. So my lifestyle, I allowed my lifestyle to dictate my actions, and my environment of being in a gang and drug infested neighborhood to dictate my character. Okay, so I met my wife when I was growing up in one of my homes, and I used to go to her house. Her dad and mom loved me. They used to feed me. I had my own ice cream because that's my favorite snack. And they just took me in. I was friends with her sister, her brother, and I was just part of the family. I protected her. I made sure nothing bad happened to her. So that was my role at that time. We kept in contact when I went to prison, because the thing is, I told her I was coming back, and I never came back. That was the thing. And so, and that left a kind of a hole in her heart. And so she disappeared for about 10 years and then came back. And she wrote me letters. I didn't respond to about 3 of them. I threw them away because I was so mad that she left. And of course, we were just friends. But as we got older, and when she came back, she came to visit me, surprise visit. And I told her, I walked away from that visit going, I'm going to marry her. I'm not letting her go. And so the next visit she came in, I said, hey, I just want to let you know there's good news and bad news. I said that the bad news is you're stuck with me. The good news is I'm marrying you.
He never asked me if I would marry him. He just told me I would marry him. And there was no objection. My family was also friends with my husband when we first met. So he, hung out with both my sister and my brother and myself. My parents loved him. And then when he went to prison and became incarcerated, my family attempted to deter me from being with him. But when we did get together, my mom had already passed away. My dad had passed away at that point as well. So our extended family, my aunt and my uncle, have all been very supportive of our relationship. I didn't have to convince them that he's who I wanted to be with. They just wanted to make sure that he treated me well. And that was their main concern. There was no concern on his current situation at the time or where he was at or what his crimes were. It was just that he was good to me.
I went to prison when I was 18 years old for I was accused of a rape charge that I did not commit. And I was forced to, it was just a messed up system. I was already caught up in it and I was a slam dunk according to the district attorney. And so I went through prison as a youth offender trying to proclaim my innocence, and it did not work. They said I was a liar. So I swore to myself when I got out, I would not admit to anything I didn't do anymore.
I think that I tried to be as unbiased as possible. Human nature wants to protect the people that you love. For me, I tell myself that I wasn't there, that regardless of what my opinion is, I have to be okay with the possibility of either side of the spectrum. I am aware of the dynamics. So, of course, I am partial to my husband's side. However, for me, when I was growing up, I wasn't the best kid. I made a lot of stupid decisions that could have easily put me in prison as well. And so I try to factor that in, that, we put ourselves in situations that have the potential to change our lives forever. Whether it's truth or whether it's fabrication, it doesn't matter as much as growing from the experience and learning from the experience and moving on. So for the charges, it's unfortunate because that is something that's going to impact his life for the rest of his life. But that charge also saved his life. So depending on how I look at it, not only was it a curse, it was also a blessing.
It was that feeling of when you used to wake up in the morning, roll up your mattress, and you would put all your stuff on your bed and you would go to yard. And there was always, I remember always going through my stuff to make sure I didn't have anything in there that my family would be ashamed of me for. And because I never knew if I was coming back to that cell.
There's always difficulties. At work, I had, I was pretty open about where my husband was at. And a lot of my coworkers would come up to me and go, well, what are you going to do if your husband decides when he comes home from prison, he doesn't want to be with you? Or what if you find out that he doesn't love you? Or, because it's not the same problems that everybody else has. I didn't have to worry about my husband coming home from work saying, well, I just got laid off from my job, or the car just blew up. But I had to worry about my husband calling me and telling me that he got caught with a knife on the yard, or somebody just stabbed him, or he just lost 90 days good time. So the difficulties that we faced, I don't think are any more or less significant than any other relationship that wasn't partly behind bars. A lot of it was just mental, the unknown.
So when I first went in, I was on a high security level 4, a 180 design, which is pretty violent. It's I was in one of the most violent prison in California at the time. It was a scary, frightening experience, but I was forced to show no emotion. I put on this social mask that I wasn't scared, I was fearless, but in reality, I was scared to death. I had good people around me at that time where they understood who I was, and I didn't carry myself accordingly to certain categories or boxes or stereotypes.
It's a very strange encounter. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and I received a phone call from a person who was at our church, and she saw some young boys in the church office. She walked in and said, "May I help you?" And they said, "Oh, we're waiting for the pastor and youth group." And she said, "I don't think there's youth group today, but let's find out. Let's call Pastor Carl." So she called and she handed the phone to Lawrence. And I talked with them as they were burglarizing our church. And I said to them, I didn't know they were burglarizing our church. I said, "Well, we don't have youth group today, but if you leave your name and number, I'll keep you posted and maybe you can come on one of our other activities." Well, Lawrence left his telephone number to his family home where he was living. And when Tuesday, when I came in, we could see that the church had been burglarized. We called the police. They came, took a report, and I said to the detective, "I have a telephone number from one of the young men that I talked to on the phone. What should I do? Should I call it?" And he said, "Yes, call it and see what happens." So I called and I got Lawrence's mother. And she said, "Oh, my boy is involved in a gang and they're bad boys. And I can see that there is equipment in his room from your church. And I would love to just give it back." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll meet you down at the church in 20 minutes and you can give it back, no questions asked." Well, I went down and no one ever came. A few days later, Lawrence's mother came to the church and introduced herself and said her son, Lawrence, was in a gang and he was associating with very bad boys and she didn't like it. And she even gave me the address where she thought a couple of the other boys lived. But she said, "But you have to be really careful because they could hurt you, they could hurt me." So she was very much afraid. And I said, "Well, I won't do anything with the telephone number." And I didn't. That's how I first met Lawrence. Actually, it was just over a phone call. And then it was probably several years later that I received a letter from him and a check in the mail, a restitution check, trying to pay for some of the things that they had stolen. Well, it's been my custom when people give money to the church who are not members of the church, I write them a thank you letter. So I wrote him thanking him for the money that he sent. And that began a correspondence with him, and that's probably 17 or 18 years ago. So we corresponded over the years, and then it was phone calls as well. And he was rather surprised because I wasn't angry and mad at him.
We had known of each other, just bumping into each other in groups, but where we really connected is there was a group called Alternatives to Violence Project that came to Mill Creek State Prison, and so they had conducted their first meeting with some of the inmates, and some of those inmates became facilitators for that group. Lawrence and I were not in that first batch. We were actually in the second batch, which they call T4F, which was training for facilitator. And we went through the training together, and so we got to know each other a lot better. And then it's AVP is the acronym for Alternatives to Violence Project. We actually got paired up as co-facilitators, and so we became team members for Alternatives to Violence Project.
First encounter of meeting him was actually, we went to the prison and visited him there, and we had been corresponding with him for some period of time. So there were the letters, and I felt somewhat acquainted, but actually going into the prison was really a different experience. I had never done that before, so that was very unique. But I think that through the letters, the things that we wrote back and forth, we had a chance to get acquainted. And then when he came to live with us after he got out of prison, we just welcomed him into our home. We just figured, okay, now you're part of the family. We'll see how this goes. I don't know exactly, because we didn't know exactly how it would all go, but we just tried to live our lives in a way that was normal and natural for us, and just to include him in that. I felt that he seemed to, in the beginning, of course, it was a little awkward for all of us, just trying to sort of figure out things. But I think he just saw that we had kind of a system in our home, and that system was one of trying to be welcoming, but also that our household would run smoothly and everybody has responsibilities. And so we all pitch in, we're kind of a team together. And he seemed to gravitate toward all of that. We had a lot of time with one another, so that as he found himself dealing with things, we'd sit down and we'd have long conversations. Fortunately, we had the time to do that. And I think all of us benefited from it, but he particularly seemed to appreciate all of that. So I don't know, I just run a household like any woman runs a household, and we just included him in that. And he seemed to warm up to that very, very much. So I'm just a regular person like anybody else, but somehow he seems to admire that.
There's no normalcy. I thought that I was chasing something that was normal. There's nothing normal about normal. It's a figment of imagination. My life now is just, I want to help people. I want to be a servant. I want to be of service to the community, to the families, to everybody, and just be I'll try to leave people, places, things better than I found them. And I do that by prayer. I do that by interactions. I do that by community service. There's just a part of me now that it's not about me. It's not Lawrence. It's you. What can I do for you? How may I be of service? And it's not very practiced today. And, I just really want to be the best version that I was meant to be. And I also want my son to grow up admiring what I do and how I've changed and what I'm doing for people. And I want to give him something to go on as a young man himself. So legacy it's based to help the families to understand the needs that must be met for the people coming out. But it doesn't just end there. It goes to community service. So when somebody gets out of prison, we get the community involved by doing a cook-off. We'll do $5 plates, put all that money towards that returning citizen. So he has clothes, food, and most importantly, the networking, because it takes a village to raise a child, but it also, takes a village to keep a man in there. And so that's our motto, is it takes a village. We want success, and we want permanent reentry. And I feel that how we approach, we can't change laws right now. That's a long-term goal. So the short term, so we don't get where we don't stand still, is we focus on how do we mess up their count? How do we keep the people out? And how can we encourage the youth and the community to want to invest and make right choices and decisions? So by helping the formerly incarcerated come out, it shows a younger generation of how the community is a support network and how they want, and we try to have them invest in that. That way it stops the recidivism where they don't want to follow down the wrong steps. And in legacy, we use the bad examples as good examples. Nobody is unsavable. We are not our crime. We are the best examples and best role models for society in that aspect. And we exploit that. We let kids know what, if you go down this road, this is the possibility, this is the likelihood. And but we also use people that are success stories and that don't get involved in the crap to use them to say, you know, because I can't tell you about success. I can't tell you how to go to college, but I can tell you, you know, if you go to prison, what led me up to prison. So we everybody fits a piece of the puzzle to make a big picture. We use every story, every voice. We are about each other. It's not about just one individual. Every day in the back of my mind, I thought I was going to die on that yard, or I was going to kill somebody on that yard.
All the leaves are brown and the sky